Welcome to folks. We'll wait another minute or so for everybody else to come in, but I was going to welcome you here now. And how are you? It's Helen.
Good.
Yeah. And where are you calling from?
I'm calling from, I'd say Salmon Arm, BC. So it's kind of about 4 or 5 hours north of Vancouver.
Out on the island or up the peninsula?
Up, it's up in what they call around the Okanagan. It's wine country. Wine
Okay.
and
Okanagan, I know that is. Okay.
very beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. We just moved from Vancouver last year, and it was just time to leave. It's growing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Janice, how are you? Oh, Janice is on mute.
Oh.
It's all good.
So where are you at, David? Where do you live?
I live now back in Portland, Oregon.
Oh, Portland's such a beautiful place. Oh my God, it's beautiful.
Yeah, I was living in Sydney for about 4 years and then came back to California. And then once my daughter was off to university, I came back here. I had been planning to move to Amsterdam, and that kind of fell apart a bit during the pandemic. And so I decided to kind of come up here and regroup and kind of figure out where I wanted to go from here.
Yeah. Well, it's the city of bridges. It's a very beautiful city.
It is.
Yeah.
So we have Shannon who's declared herself from Wisconsin. So that's good.
Good.
Now just here from Perth.
Got a few more.
Yeah. All right, and we'll welcome Michelle in. There you are. Wow. If you'll excuse me for just 1 second, hold on.
Hi, Michelle, how are you going?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm really good. I got up really early this morning and then had a bit of a nap and then nearly forgot to wake up. Terrible. I just said I'll just lay down for a minute.
It's only 10 o'clock in the morning over there, isn't it?
It is. So don't ask.
Okay.
Have a big night. Yeah.
There we go.
Thanks for asking.
Okay.
I contracted a flu right after some minor surgery in January, and it's not left. So that means when I get a cough, it doesn't just go away. It's like it kind of grabs me. So I apologize for that, but so be it. So welcome to everybody. So I'll put some slides up in a few minutes, but the purpose of these sessions is sort of a warm up for our new program starting in April. And we had a number of people that had signed up for one of 2 individual programs. And I had sort of an epiphany at the beginning of the year that for a whole host of reasons, the 2 programs needed to be merged now, not later. The plan was always there for this, but it just felt like the time was now. So we kind of hit the pause button. And we're offering these sessions both for the original participants to kind of stay connected to them while we waited for the new program to launch, and then also to reach out to new people who might be interested in this program and this way of working. And so at each of these sessions, we introduce sort of one piece of the work and allow us to give you an experience of that and talk about what it means for the program, but also for your own practice. And just as a bit of a sort of a setup for this particular one, if I know I'll probably appear quite tiny on your screen, but if you can all see the whiteboard behind me, which is where I do a lot of my thinking and design work, you'll see the rough draft of what we're going to do today. And I created this last night just for you guys today. And I think it uses pieces that for people like Michelle will be familiar, but brings them together in a way that has never existed before yesterday. And because the practice itself, I think, will be valuable, but more importantly, I wanted to show you what it's like to work this way. To not like agonize for days and late nights, kind of perfecting a curriculum or trying out a model like 20 times to make sure we get it right. But to take an idea and a need and say, what do I know that might have something to say about this? And how in real time could I whiteboard this either in my mind or literally in my case on a whiteboard and come up with something? And so I was kind of noodling on something for myself last night. And I said, I know a lot about this. What can I pull that would help me kind of make a choice I needed to make? And so there is no intent on my part to teach you this model. I just invented it yesterday. Nor am I going to expect you to understand it all or even do it all or even whatever. It's just, I want this to simulate what it would be like if you were in one of my ID actual client programs, which is to come up with something that are pieces of the puzzle that emerge from what's happening in the room, taking what we know and creating something in the moment. So that's what I've done. And so I want to give you that feel for what this is like and why I feel it's infinitely more powerful and valuable than normally what we tended to do with these kind of things. Is there anything that any of you would like, those of you who know me, or those of you who are visiting, anything that would be important for you today for our time together? All right.
Sorry, David, I'm always slow to unmute myself. My apologies. Kia
No
ora.
worries.
I'm going to sign up for the ID Way program, you know, and which I'm really looking forward to. I think it's going to be fabulous. But I was looking again at the website this morning, and there was a couple of things that struck me, and I just kind of like to get your take a little bit more on it. You've got a couple of statements, because and one of them is, and it just absolutely was amazing for me because I've been doing some of this. The ID Way experience will enable you to compost each of what you no longer need and sharpen new ways. And then you said, while your clients appreciate what you know, I rock up as a experienced coach. Most of what they face is in the unknown. And that just kind of just went for me. And I'd just like, a couple of comments from you on that.
Yes. So one of the strange things about coaches is they seem like they're endless consumers of new information. They don't want, they have more FOMO than a teenager. And when I remember in one of the workshops I did live before the pandemic, they were asking me a similar question. And I said, so write down on a piece of paper, like the last 5 programs, books, certifications you got, just write down what they are. And then I'd like you to turn to your partner, look at your list and tell them how much of that do you actually use in your life and your practice? And many of them will discover none, right? I got certified in family constellations or in positive psychology. And it's kind of shaped my thinking, but I don't actually really use any of it because I never got confident. I never practiced enough or whatever and whatever. And yet coaches continue to consume. And so and they consume as if more information would be helpful to them. But my observation, even looking at myself, like I happened to stumble across a video of me doing a demonstration of narrative coaching probably 6 years ago. I'm a very different person than I was even 6 years ago. I can learn things now and at a speed now I could not then, even though I was just as smart then as I am now. And so the composting is really around for ourselves to lead the way with our clients to say, you already know everything you need to know for right now. And if you actually need to know something, you can always go learn that, but you don't need to know as much as you think you need to know. And then we're leading the way because our clients are swept up in the same thing. They're running around like, how do I be a better manager? What does leadership mean? They're going to all these expensive programs and it's like, you don't need all that. You're going to spend 3 days and $5,000 or whatever it is, and you're going to use 3% of it. And I used to tell my, this is the anecdote I shared last time. When clients would tell me if I'm these big fancy programs that they had gotten a few good tips, my response was always the same. Buy me a nice beer. We'll spend 20 minutes. I'll give you the 3 tips now and we can be done and go home. And so, you know, in the past, the future always seemed just slightly adjacent to or similar enough to the present where we could sort of kind of see where we're going and pretend like we could make plans to go there. And I don't know about you, I have no idea what the hell is happening in our world and where this is all going. And it's evolving and devolving, and it's, you know, it's working and not working. And we have a human need to feel in control. And so we make up these things to give us the illusions that we're in control. And I'm just feeling now that if we're going to be in integrity with ourselves and useful to our clients, it's about being honest with them. I don't know. And I will stand here with you. I'm not going to throw models at you or business books at you. I'm just going to stand here and just breathe with you. And what are you noticing? What are you aware of? What seems important to you? What should we do next? And that just feels like it's always been true about my work. It's even more true now. Because the stakes of a lot of these games are so high now that there's no way to predict whether we're going to win or lose them. And nor do I have any, it doesn't change one iota what I do. So I'm just going to stand with them in the unknown, and we're going to see what we can do next. You're welcome. One of the, I've never really held myself back, as Michelle would know, but one of the gifts of getting older is I have less and less a need to not be a contrarian and to not be a curmudgeon a bit, but in a way that I feel is what I call enlightened pragmatism. Just spend the precious energy and time we have on things that actually make a difference. Yeah. Hey, Shannon. I can see you now. Welcome. All right. Is that good enough for now? All right. Let me just put some slides up for you. So this is the kind of the opening slide for all of these sessions. We'll do 2 more in March, and then the program starts in early April. I've always been fascinated by alchemists. I've read a lot of Jung and alchemy, and I just found this graphic, which I've sort of adapted for this purpose, as a great analogy for ID. So rather than trying to, it would be like going to the doctor and the doctor lecturing you about heart disease, but you didn't come there, your heart's fine. You came there for something else. So it's like, you know, each of us, if I were to ask you to kind of survey your life and what wisdom do you think you've acquired, what knowledge feels really important and deep in you, what matters to you, each of these containers would be filled with something a bit different for each of us. So there is no one way to do ID. It's really like curating and going. The other part of composting is getting rid of all the crap in your cupboard or your refrigerator that you never eat or never going to use, and curating like, what is it, the essence of what I'm trying to bring to the client? It's all on my workbench. And then as things emerge that my client needs, I think, they need a few drops of the green. I think that's what they need. And so we're going to use that as an analogy all through the program to help you identify what's in your vials and your containers, and begin to allow you to trust yourself to use the things that are going to be relevant for what's actually happening. So we do a little bit of welcome. And then if you come to these, you're going to see these every time until the program starts. This is the anchor. This is my daily meditation for myself. While we know Robin Williams for his humor, he actually was an extraordinarily kind human. So one of the pieces, for example, one of the anecdotal pieces of his contracts for his movies was that they had to contract with X number of homeless people to give them jobs on the movie sets. And so for me, when all else fails, I just come back to kindness. And you'll see this sort of woven into kind of what we do as a way of creating spaces for people to acknowledge the battles they're fighting, to not feel like we need to rescue them for their battles or fight them for them, to walk with them in what they're facing, whatever that is, whether it's aspirational or not, and always come back to a place of kindness. And so that's kind of where we're anchoring ourselves. And the thing about ID was the merger of two programs, the ID Way. It was the merger of our our pilot year of our narrative release program, which is really the inner work to be able to work this way. It's sort of the core of the spiritual philosophy that sits underneath everything that I do, with the integrative development practitioner program, which was more of the theory and practice of then what do you do from that place? And oftentimes in our life, these two are often separate. We go to a yoga retreat and then we go to professional development workshop. Well, this will bring both of those together in one place. Every single module will be this intertwining of what is it you're being asked to learn in this module, and how would you need to develop yourself to be able to not only learn that, but do something with that. When I look back at the narrative release graduates, they said, this has been an amazing experience. And I'm really curious now what I can do with this. They needed ID. If I think about most of the ID graduates, they were like, this is like an astoundingly different and better way to work with clients. But how do I get the courage to actually try it? They needed NR. And Michelle may share later, but was involved in a project led by a number of our graduates. And they were commenting about the distinction they were making of those who had been through the NR half of this and those who had not. And so we're going to bring the two of these together. All right. So I'd like to just kind of move us into, I'd like to share with you the kind of practice for today that I've created and then give that a whirl. Is that okay? Everybody good? All right. And you're a small enough group, just flag us down if you have any comments or questions as we go. All right. So if you've done any corporate training at all, you would have heard this line 1,000 times. And so, you know, you've got this beautiful agenda. We're going to go around this beautiful fall foliage, and we're going to go around this beautiful mountain winding road, and all of a sudden, screeching to a halt, the person digs in their heels, puts, you know, crosses their arm and said, that just won't work here, or that's really lovely that you can say that, but that doesn't very practical, or all the grumpiness that comes out sometimes from clients, which is almost always a projection of their own anxiety. It has almost nothing to do with us. So this is, you know, a common occurrence anytime in coaching or facilitation or training, when we bump into resistance or people not able to do the work. So I want to give you a picture of what happens in a traditional context, what often most of us have done or do. And then I'm going to show you what an ID approach to this might look like. So this is the way I was depicting this. So you get this in your face. Well, that won't work. That's really sweet of you to say that, or that's really like, seems really exciting, but that would never work here. So most of us immediately go into some level of defensiveness, and then a variety of other emotions that come up, and based on how we interpret that, how personally we take that. But then most of us say, oh, therefore I must double down and explain this better or more, or show them or cajole them, or do whatever strategies we have to try to convince a participant that this actually would work here. So we're going to run around on the stairs, getting up like, well, let me just give you this help, or let me show you this, or if I give you an example, and we exhaust ourselves trying to convince them, or we say, you know, but here's the ways that you could use this, and all the descending stairs, and here's how Bob's used this in your company. And we just run around trying to help them, to convince them and persuade them that this actually would work here. And we often exhaust ourselves doing all the lifting for them, which is not useful for actually either of you. This is what, and so this is where we put our focus on all the stairs before, during, and after what we're trying to get them to learn. However, this is what they focus on, which is the unknown. I don't like this. I'm uncomfortable with this. This challenges what I think is true. This seems too hard. This is uncomfortable. I'm afraid to try this because people will laugh at me. There's 1,000 reasons why they're not interested in what you propose to them because they're not seeing themselves in this. And so they throw up a culturally acceptable, professionally acceptable smokescreen. Well, that would never work here. Now, they may be right. That what you're offering may not be effective for them. It may not work for them, but that's actually a pretty unusual occurrence. It's much more about the fact that this is making them uncomfortable or them uneasy or they might say, I see all this, I could see how this would be really helpful, but I can't visualize myself doing this, and I'm afraid I'd look stupid. So their needs are very different than our needs as professionals. So the ID basically way is stop fighting this reality. Stop trying to persuade them, convince them, manipulate them, berate them, whatever it is we do to get people to get on board. For me, one of the cardinal rules of working this way is I treat every person like an adult with total free will. And I will tell them, if you do not want to be here, please leave. Or support others to be successful here. I don't take this personally. It's your life. It's your time. If this is not working for you, I have no judgment of that, but I also don't want you to be here to clog up what we're trying to do. I have no need to persuade them to be there unless they have a legitimate question, or like maybe English is their second language and they're concerned about keeping up, or they realize they're the only woman in a room of 12 men or whatever, and they're feeling a bit anxious about that, which is understandable, given how a lot of men behave in workshops. So there are legitimate reasons why, with a little bit of conversation, we can help them move to a place where they can allow themselves to be there. So I want to show you what one of the pieces that came to me. This is not the only thing about ID, but it's one that sort of represents the philosophy and the spirit of what we try to do. So oftentimes when people put up a comment like this, or they say they want to learn, but they're actually not doing anything in the workshop that's going to change anything, we try to use their own language to help understand and help them understand what's actually happening for them in real time. So if a client says in a workshop, a leader, like maybe doing a leadership program, I don't see how this would be useful to me, or I can't really visualize myself doing that, that may be true. They may actually be speaking their truth, or they may not, but I don't know what they want me to do about that. And so I'm going to show you one of the tools that we use to kind of help them and help us understand, what would it take for you to participate? What would it take for you to try this? And so one of the ways we do that is using their actual language. So we might start with this notion of the word that. And so we're going to use one of the frames we use, which is it's called PRO, to help a person say, like right in the middle of the workshop, I don't understand this model, or we tried this and it didn't work. And they're basically like, there's this pregnant moment where they are basically wanting you to rescue them and tell them what they should do, which I'm not going to do. So like, well, let's just pause here for a minute. Would you mind pausing for a minute? Let's explore this word that, literally. So when you say that won't work here, what is the that you're talking about? And let's pause and like really drop into that. We're not trying to fix it. We're just trying to understand it. And then allowing them just to focus on that simple word allows them to get clear about what their anxiety is actually about, without any pressure of having them to change anything. Just tell me about that, what that word. What is it about the that that's not, you don't think it's going to work? And then as I start to pause and kind of sit back and sort of trust you a bit more and really start to maybe think about this a little bit, we might go to the next word. Well, let's just relax into that. Well, if you didn't have to worry about that so much, tell me about this word won't. Is that couldn't or shouldn't, or I don't know how to, what is that won't? What does that mean? And what is it about your culture that leads you to this conclusion of won't? And all of this is a very relatively benign practice because we're just looking at words. And yet they're revealing so much of their inner narrative about what's actually happening. And as we get them to relax into that won't, well, it's more like they can start to internalize more of it for themselves. And as they relax, they start to open up. So tell me about the word work. Like if this did work here, what would that look like? And specifically, where is it not going to work? And what does that even mean to say it's not going to work? And they're starting to open up, and they're, maybe their minds are more open, their perspectives are expanding, maybe their heart's opening, and they begin to tell you more and more about what's actually happening. And then we focus on the fourth word in this phrase around the word here. So it might be a question like, if you imagined yourself now, after having had this conversation, actually trying this to the best of your ability, where would you apply this first? Where would you apply this last? Or not at all? What do you notice about yourself as you imagine yourself trying this? Oh, maybe part of their discovery was, I've made this a huge mountain, and maybe it's just a molehill I can stand on. I don't have to solve all of this. What if I just tried this like in my next conversation with my teenage son? What if I didn't make the here so dramatically big? What if I made it small? And so we're using this as a way for them to identify and articulate what it actually is. Where's the opening for learning here? And so you might have half of a room in a workshop who's giving you some version of this won't work here, or I don't want to do this. But they each need something different in terms of what would help them engage. So rather than efforting and like running around trying to please them or do whatever to get them involved, we're helping them tell you and tell themselves what is it they actually need for themselves. And so I'm gonna skip the slide for a minute, and I'm gonna go to this one, and so this is just an example of what you might discover if you worked this way. So the person might discover, if you were to interview them afterwards, as I pause, I realize that the word that is actually more about my own anxiety, about not fitting in here in this culture if I try this. It's not really about them or what you're even doing. It's my own anxiety about not fitting in. Okay, so now we're getting somewhere. Now we have a better understanding. Already what you're going to do next is change. Even if that's all you got, you now have a very different starting point than trying to convince them to engage with what you're doing. So if I pause and actually can relax about that, and you're asking me these questions, and I'm not stressing about having to do something, they start to think about starting to surrender their story about won't. And it's not like that it won't work, it's that they won't work, because they're really afraid of this idea of having to confront the unknown. What's going to happen if I try this? We've never talked like that here. And what if I just relaxed about that and thought, well, I could manage this, and I could decide where my boundaries are, and wow, maybe I'm just having to deal with my own fear. It has nothing to do with the model or the practice. As they relax, then they're more open to actually learning and noticing more and paying attention more. And if you were to coach them in that moment, which we often do in workshops, to really be in this, where the opening is, what are you seeing now that you didn't see when you just crossed your arms and said, this won't work? I'm seeing that I have a pattern at work now that's very different than when I started, of just keeping my head down, not drawing any attention to myself. And what you're asking me is to learn a new communication model that's opening me back up. And I'm resisting that. but it's not about what you're proposing or what you're trying to teach us. I didn't want to have to admit myself, I'm keeping my head down because I'm actually quite unhappy here. That's why I don't want to have this work, because I don't believe it's going to work. I'm already sort of skeptical of my company changing. I'm already sort of in a way given up, and I'm really not happy here. And then as we move them to say, give it from that discovery, like, what is yours to do now? What is the act? I need to face my own unhappiness. And I need to make some decisions about whether I stay in this organization or not. And if you do this well, this could take 5 minutes. And so think about what you would do after the first step and after what you do after the fourth. A very, very different conversation. And all you've done is investigated with them their own words. And then they could discover in this process the key to what would make your process or your model useful to them. But now you have a much better understanding of what might be in their way and why it would be important to them to learn what you're trying to teach them. So what was coming to me in this working on the whiteboard was just trying to help both of you understand where's the actual opening. What does this person actually need to pay attention and go do? And by virtue of you learning as they share, then you have a better idea of what you need to offer them. The vast majority of which you won't understand unless you do things like this. All right. I'm going to stop there for a few minutes, see if there's any questions or thoughts, and then I'm going to give you a chance to practice this yourself in some small groups. All right. This is where you ask all kinds of brilliant questions. That's just your cue.
Me again. Hey, David,
Yeah,
I had completely forgotten that PRO model from the narrative coaching thing, and it makes complete sense. And thank you for sharing it within the context of that workshop. It's resonating in lots of different ways, and like probably many thousands of other coaches, I've had that experience many times and done all of the techniques that you described at the beginning. Anyhow, when you were first exploring that with us in the narrative coaching stuff, I know that was a few years ago, were you using it in the same way, or is this what's the move in your thinking here?
Well, I think in the beginning, I was in many ways focusing more on the development of the coach. Coaches often rush because they're already trying to think the next question. And I'm right now, actually today, literally, I'm working on describing my pre-summit session for WBEX for June. And I'm tempted to call it Please Stop Coaching. Because it's a very common piece of feedback I give coaches who are so eager to coach that they're not even noticing 80% of what's in front of them because they're trying to coach. So I think a lot of it was in the beginning was support coach development. And in this, and so like when I, with the pandemic, of course, everything changed for all of us. But when I would do live programs, particularly if I was using other faculty, or maybe it was through a business school where I was sort of given other faculty I needed to use, I turned all the faculty into coaches. I said, show up in these programs as a coach. I'm not trying to teach them coaching, but you're not faculty. There may be moments, like little 10-minute increments, where you get to be faculty, like because somebody wants to know the theory behind something, or can you say more about these steps? But by and large, you're coaching. And so the pro model is really what we're doing with the other person. And so we're helping them notice opportunities in, say, a workshop where there's a readiness and an openness to learn because of somebody tried something and the practice fell apart, or they bumped into a fear they have or a blind spot they have, and noticing that. And rather than trying to go correct that or show them how to do it well, we use that as a portal to like, what could you, if you were to pause at that, say at that moment where you kind of realize you did something that didn't work, just pause there. Now relax your grip on that. What are you being asked to open up to? What new action could you try from that more open space that might give you some clues about what you could do differently? And then you're back to pausing again. And so you're then enabling participants to recognize that they can get their specific need. It's maybe unique to them or maybe unique to some of them in real time as it's showing up and rearing its head, and get resolution on it, or at least understanding of it in real time. And you won't know that. You can't do that sitting there silently. You have to be in motion. So this is, but again, it's not about our stairs or our path, or I have all these brilliant things laid out for you, and there's lemonade stands over there, and there's a little nap space there, and all these things we engineer for people. It's like, stop walking, you maybe even step off the path. What are you noticing about yourself as a participant? And how is that like the rest of your life? And then let's pause and just look at that and be with that. And what do you notice about that? And so what I find happens is that rather than answering legions of questions in workshops or trying to band-aid everybody, you're actually helping them identify patterns of behavior or thinking that show up in all parts of their life. So if you solve it once in the workshop, or you at least address it, that will ripple out into many other aspects of their life.
Thank you. I think the Band-Aids are going to go with the way of the composting of my other materials.
You bet.
Thank you.
They do come in handy. Like, so if somebody's bleeding because they're like maybe they've overshared and they feel too vulnerable or something, they don't need any of this yet. They just need a Band-Aid to stop the bleeding so that they can actually be present to what's actually going on. So again, the metaphor I always use is I just put this in my back pocket. I was a Boy Scout for a long time. I don't do it right now, but for decades I carried Band-Aids in my wallet because you never knew when somebody was going to need one. So, all right. Any other questions or thoughts while we're here? All right. All right, I'm going to go back to this one. So this is what I'm going to ask you to do, but I need to offer you a caveat. I have absolutely zero expectation that you're going to be able to do this the way I've set it up, let alone do it well. There is no contest. There are no prizes. The purpose of this is not for you to emulate what I've just shown you, or to even to do exactly what I've written here. The purpose for you, which is what I played with myself last year on the whiteboard yesterday, was take the intent of this and make it work for the group that you're in. Do ID on this exercise. Don't try to religiously copy this. If you do, that's fine too. If that works for you, great. And so I'm going to ask one of you, there'll be, I think one person had dropped off. So we'll put you in a group of 3 and a group of 2. So I'd like one of you to identify something you really actually are finding challenging right now related to change, or it could be in terms of a type of client or a particular client, something you'd like to explore and experiment with. I'd like one of the other 2 people in your group to help you come up with a short phrase that captures the essence of the challenge. Like, what is the pushback you're getting from a particular client? So one of them this morning was, he won't try anything new. Okay, great summary of how you're perceiving him. And then to look at this about unpacking, like I did before, each of the words in that phrase they came up that describes their challenge, and to think about them in terms of nouns and verbs, kind of the role they're playing in the overall story. So here's the object of our focus. Here's what they need to let go of on the story that's shaping their beliefs about that object. Here's what we're being asked to, they're being asked to release or let go of, to kind of open up to. And here's the sort of the subject, the return to self. You know, what is happening for them as a person, as you're inviting them to go do something differently. So it's helping them to pause, kind of notice what's true about what's going on, and relax into their story. And what if they let go of that story a bit and surrendered? Maybe won't is I don't want to. Okay, well, that's if you relax into that discovery, that's a very different conversation. And then just sort of invite the person to kind of move around the kind of circle that we had up here. You might want to take a screenshot of this if that would be helpful to you. Because we can't show this in the breakout rooms. And then if you want to put you can take a screenshot of this as well. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you half an hour. This morning, people had a chance to do it twice, so 2 different people got to go. And just play with this, try something. It doesn't, and see what happens. It's all about seeing what happens. It's not about trying to do it right or getting somewhere or being successful. It's actually starting to play with the words in their actual declaration or your framing about what's happening for them around their challenge, and how you could help them pause, relax, and open in a way that would help them see this differently and create this space for change. Okay? Are there any questions before I put you in your small groups? All right. So I'm going to put you into breakout rooms. We'll create 2 of them. 30 minutes. Excellent. You all set? Have fun. And I look forward to seeing what you discover when we come back together. All right. So I'm curious about your experience. Helen's got brilliant words to some of the tip of her tongue. I can see that.
Me. I'll say something. I just want to talk about what I really, we did an exercise that worked out awesome. That was with me and it was fantastic. But I want to go a little bit forward to, we talked about, Natchita brought, near the end, she brought up something around meditation won't work here. And Michelle kind of said, here's some ideas of how I would handle it, kind of deal. And what was really interesting when I think of that, like meditation won't work here, is people come in with an idea, well, this is meditation, but if you go around, you would get around a table of 10 people, you're going to get 10 different things about what meditation is. Yeah. You can see how they're thinking this big block, and then all of a sudden you start to take apart that block, and it's like, well, maybe it will work. And that's kind of a little bit of that kind of drilling down, pause, relax, open up, and act, because you all of a sudden kind of breaking it open. It's like, well, what is meditation? Well, it's this to someone, and it's that to someone else, and it's like, oh, well, now that you're saying that, they're not quite saying that out loud, but they're like going through in their mind. They're like, oh, well, yeah, that would work for me.
Yeah.
Not here in my office or before I go to work or when I come home, or like it just kind of opens it right up.
Yeah. And often what happens is that people never go to those questions and just dismiss meditation altogether.
Yeah.
And you never actually learn, well, what they actually would like. And they've framed it as meditation, that because oftentimes, particularly when you get requests like from an HR director or a client for some work, they're going to frame it in language they understand. Mm-hmm. I want a workshop. And most would say, okay, and then we'd be off on a race to find the workshop. And maybe that's the completely wrong solution. And if we just stopped and said, so what led you to believe that a workshop's a good idea? Or where did you, so that you kind of back up. Well, I don't like meditation because then I'd have to chant, and they have all these illusions about meditation. But what about meditation's intriguing to you? Oh, we need like pauses in our day. Oh, great. So what would that look like? And just leave the word meditation out of the picture altogether.
Yeah.
And then meditation might end up being part of it, but it's no longer is the gate through which you have to go to get somewhere.
Yeah.
Great example.
Yeah, Nadja had this,
Yeah.
sorry, Ellen.
I was just going to say, thanks, Michelle, Nadja.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, thank you, Helen, for your openness in sharing and going through, David, without we're not even using the framework. And then I was the observer watching the framework coming out of it without even looking at the framework.
Yeah.
So that was quite an interesting observation. Yeah, I just had about a minute 30. Nadja had a curiosity about, the generations with mindfulness and such, and in the corporate world, and people dismissing it, and what would they even think if you decided to bring it in. And so I did a 30-second your quadrant. I'm trying to, and we could share it. It was actually quite, it was quite easy to do. And then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, we came back into the room. So, I just wanted to, as an observation, Nadja held space so well for Helen as we led with no judgment in the room. So let's just play and see what happens.
Yep.
And even though we could have thought of, the 4 words, with pause, relax, open, act, as I was sitting there, the 4 words came into the room anyway by the end. Right. And it was just an interesting thing that you could actually add. I was just saying to the girls, wouldn't it be really nice if we took our finger and we followed it around and saw what would come through again once we discovered again what our 4 words were. I thought, oh my gosh, that would be such a great experience.
Yeah.
So thanks, girls, for your time. It was great.
Part of what comes up for me, Michelle, is a couple of things. One is, if this model were instrumental in your job, then I would probably teach this differently, but that was not the purpose of the activity. It was to give you a few new cards to play with and see where it took you. So that's one thing, is just to begin to realize, that this is how ID often feels. Like, again, noticing, wow, this all showed up anyways. And we had enough for what we needed for Helen's purpose for right now.
Yeah.
Right. And that's all you need. You don't need, I could give you like my entire PhD dissertation to explain why this works, but it's completely unnecessary.
Yeah.
But the second thing was that one of the things that I try to do is to create processes that, to the best of my ability, emulate reality and like in nature. So, for example, you look at the pause, relax, and open. Yes, it's a fundamental element of Buddhism, but think about it this way. A friend invites you to a party, and your friend is the only person that you know there. You go to the house or the spot for the party, and you go in the front door. What's the first thing that you do? You pause and kind of get a feel for the room. Oh, okay, these look like my kind of people. And you start to relax. And then you spot your friend, you relax even more. And then you can now enter the party and open up to the party. Most people are not just going to walk right in because they don't know what they're getting themselves into. Like, do I even want to be here? Do I like these people? Oh, this is too loud and they're playing music I hate. Oh, I might want to turn around and leave. And so we take action, and even we take better action when we've done what we naturally do anyways, which is to pause, check out our environment, kind of relax into that, and decide to what degree and in what way we want to open. And the more we can relax, because we really resonate with the group, like, oh, wow, I actually know her and I know him, and oh, wow, this is great. It's going to be fun. And then we're like totally open to the experience. And so again, the model is something that I think occurs for us instinctively which is why I don't need to teach you all the details about it, why I can put this together in a half an hour at my whiteboard and try it out. Right.
Mm.
So, yeah. So
Yeah, I think from my observation as
Yeah.
well, what we spoke about is the, you know, the 4 elements. It is again sort of also the quadrant, right? And it's
Yep,
sort of that subtle what underlies everything, you know. And then, you know, to your point about language, so whatever resonates with people, to explain it maybe afterwards, like Michelle did, or during, which it may not be front of mind, but sort of hidden somewhere. And I think from this model, what really resonate with me is the pause, you know, like you said, you know, like we get thrown and you go but and then just remember yourself to pause, regroup, and then deal with it.
Yeah. And I've even had times when I have people that I think are mature enough to handle this, where they'll offer a complaint about something in the workshop. And sometimes it's about me or the design, but mostly it's about them. And I'll say, I think you're right. This is awful. We shouldn't be doing this. No, they're stunned because no one ever says that as a trainer. And then I say, so what should we do instead? Like, what if you were me, like, what would you do? And they're like, I don't know. but then they're like, you've taken them seriously. You've kind of put a little levity in. And so tell me some more about why you don't like this. Well, you know, and then off we go on some version of this, right? So the underlying principle, which, you know, Nadia is sort of hinting at, is being in reality. I'm not interested in dissuading somebody who's not happy about what we're doing, or doesn't understand what we're doing, or doesn't agree with. I don't have any need to change that, because that's the reality we're now in, whether we like it or not. So I want to just be with it and play with it to find a way. What can we do with this? And I've even, like, I've had whole tables or groups rebel. We're not doing this. We don't like it. Great, fantastic. I'm glad you care enough to not like this. So what I'd like you to do, while we are going to do the activity, all these other people, you go off and do what you think is important about this topic.
Yep.
Great. I don't care. I don't have a need for you to do what I've suggested. It's not my life. It's yours. And if something else would be more valuable, and then they often come back quite sheepishly and go, oh, we now kind of see why we were supposed to do the other thing, because we didn't really know what we were doing. But sometimes they come up with things that are relevant for them. Great. I have no need for you to conform. So, but I want to check in also with Janice and Shannon and kind of see what emerged from your group. You're on mute, Janice.
Sorry. I was going to ask Shannon to speak, because I was the one doing the asking the questions.
Okay.
And we had the opportunity to do a sort of a 10-minute debrief after it. So, and that was really fascinating as well. But Shannon can probably talk more about her own experience of the session.
Yeah, I can share a little bit of mine. It was interesting because it felt like I don't know, I kept doing this when we talked about it, is that pause is important. So I want to say that pause is important because it allows the intuition to come in. I noticed that strongly in the beginning, because I had what I thought was the sentence, and then Jana said, I heard these sentences, this and this, and then she said one, and it just hit me, and I didn't even remember saying it. You know, so if she hadn't paused, and she would have missed that. And then what I would notice, we would go down a path, and for me, it would be like, it would shift, like, here, okay, now we're talking about this, and then this, like, it would kept refining for me where we were going. You know, that's kept what it kept feeling like for me.
Yeah.
And I apologize to Shannon for sort of doing a wee lecture in the middle, which
doing a what?
A lecture in the middle,
Oh.
which was, you know, my want. Hey, look, I just noticed that, you know, there seems to be some shoulds coming up here, and you know what shoulds are.
Well, but we'll have to put you in ID detention, Janice, too.
Yeah, I
Right.
think so. I think so.
Yeah. And so what did you
Indeed.
go? What did you two take from this then? From all that you observed about yourself and the process? Mm.
I was reminded, without that little mistake, I was reminded how intuitively I work anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Just, that sort of listening. And yes, I did write down about the 5 things that Shannon said, but it was the one, and the word was, I don't like routines. The sentence was, I don't like routines. And there were several others. And that was the sentence that Shannon couldn't remember saying. And then I gave her back the 3 or 4 other sentences. And I said, so which one do you think, in terms of David's model that we're going to play with, which one would you like to do? And when I'd said that I don't like routines one to her, she had this amazing kind of full body reaction. So we obviously agreed that was the one to do. So that reminded me also to sort of really look at how the words are falling on the person you're working with.
Yeah.
What's happening in their faces, what's happening in their bodies. And when we did the debrief, when Shannon was saying that kind of shifting from here, shifting to there. And I asked her, did she feel I was taking her in a wrong direction? Should I have been more quiet? We didn't kind of get to the real answer on that one, Shannon. Do you want to answer that now?
Sorry, what's that?
Sorry, should I have been more quiet?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I think it depends on the parts. I think this model really spaciousness
Mm-hmm.
is really helpful.
Yeah.
Mm.
Very much so.
Thank you.
And to your point, your observation, Jen, is it's not even about our intuition. It's really just our noticing of what's already happening.
Mhm.
And
Better words.
so, and that spaciousness is so important, and it's not uncommon. That effect is very common, that people don't remember what was most significant about what they said because it came from a part of themselves that they may not often be very aware of.
Yeah.
So again, the value of just really listening and honing in, trying out something if it doesn't work, but just there's a sense in which kind of the avenue we need to go on is starting to emerge there. And what people are actually going to go do is often not visible to them when they begin, which is why we don't set goals in narrative coaching, because they A, don't know, and B, if they did know, the person they're going to have to become to deliver on the goal is not the person they are now. So why am I make plans with somebody who can't do something? So yeah. So I'm conscious of time. I just wanted to share just very quickly. I'm just going to share the screen just for a minute and then we can call it a day. But just put this back up for a minute. There we go. Get this up. Yeah, so the program that we built now is the narrative release allows us to stand in the unknown and be there and not move into lecture mode or problem solving mode or rescue mode, helping mode, any of those modes that are quite familiar to us. Narrative release just allows us to just be with them. And then ID helps you know what to do in those spaces. And to be able to step into more and more kinds of moments to see what is possible. And this is sort of the design. I'm just putting this up because you'll have access to the video later on. So if you want to see any of this, you'll have a view of the screen. It's sort of the design of the way our program is put together. So I have 2 live sessions, opportunities for you to do some work in the field to experience yourself, and then working with a small pod of peers to kind of help you integrate at the very end. And then a bunch of resources that are available 24/7 to you. These are the modules. Again, you can freeze frame this if you go back to watch the video. This is also on the website. Yeah, and so we would love to have you in this program. I think I'm really thrilled to watch this kind of come together this way. It feels, and I'm at this space in my own life and practice where I just feel in a new energy around teaching this now, and a bit even more bold than in the past. And I feel like, as every day goes by, a lot of the modalities by which we traditionally work are less and less useful. And so I feel like this is the way that the future is going. And so I want to be a part of sort of providing some leadership in that and helping invite others onto the journey who would like to work in a fundamentally different way. And so thank you for your time. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to us. Happy to engage you. And the program opens up with a little bit of a mini retreat on April 4th. And we'd love to have you. And you're also welcome to come back to our last 2 ones of these sessions in March if you want to have more of. Everyone will be some form of taste of the overall program. And we look forward to having you hopefully in April. Okay. All right. Be well, my friends, and we'll see you again soon.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, David.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Take care,
Thanks.
guys.
Good to see
Bye.
you.